This beanie takes a maximum of 3 hours to make, and it combines traditional crochet for the ribbed brim and Tunisian crochet for the main body of the hat. The other thing is that by doing reductions it shapes the beanie really nicely and also avoids wasting yarn. The ribbed brim makes the hat nice and stretchy, so it will comfortably fit both adult, female and male heads. For this project I used a 6.5mm ordinary crochet hook, an 8mm 14-inch long Tunisian crochet hook, a darning needle, stitch markers, a pair of scissors and a tape measure. The yarn is 100% acrylic and chunky, recommending a hook size of 6mm. I used just under 50 grams of yarn for the brim, that is 50 meters, and just under 70 grams of yarn for the main body of the beanie, and that equates to around 110 to 120 meters. This beanie is designed to cover the ears and is 9 inches from top to bottom. The first thing to do is to make the brim, and it is a good idea to save a length of around 2 feet before doing the foundation chain, so there will be plenty of yarn to slip stitch the edges of the brim together. Create a slip knot, then chain 10, bearing in mind that the 10th chain is the turning chain for the foundation row, and 9 chains will be perfect for a brim of approximately 3 inches deep. After the 10th chain, turn the work and then insert the hook into the back loop of the second chain from the hook and do a single crochet. And that is the American single crochet. The British equivalent is double crochet. And continue with single crochets into the back loops all along the chain to the end. Now chain 1 and turn the work, and then single crochet into the back loop of the second chain from the hook, and continue with single crochets into the back loops to the end, so there will be a total of 9 stitches. At the end of the row, chain 1, turn the work, and then single crochet into the back loop of the second chain from the hook. And now you can see the ribs developing really nicely. And just continue with the back loop only single crochets until the fabric is around 18 inches long. And for that I had to crochet 55 rows. At this stage I'm going to measure the brim, so I think it's worth securing the loop so that the fabric doesn't become undone. And you can see that the chain of 9 has created a rib 3 inches wide or 3 inches deep and The 55 rows are 18 inches long, and an 18-inch long rib is ideal for an adult female or male head because it is so stretchy. And make sure that the working yarn is diagonally opposite to the long tail from the foundation chain. Now I am switching to Tunisian crochet, so remove the stitch marker and insert a Tunisian crochet hook. The one I am using is an 8mm 14-inch long hook. Before creating the foundation row, it is worth setting aside a tail of about 24 inches that will be sufficient to slip stitch the edges of the beanie together. Grab the new yarn with the hook, pull through the loop, and that is the first stitch. Now insert the hook between the first rib and the edge of the fabric and pull up another loop, and keep going along the top of the brim, pulling up 2 loops between each rib. You'll see that there are sort of natural spaces on each side of a rib. The advantage of using a different colour for the brim and the main body is that you can use up a scrap of yarn because you only need about 50 grams for the brim. And also it makes the beanie look more interesting and attractive. I have now nearly finished casting on the loops, and for the last loop I'm going to push the hook into the rib and pull up a loop there, because if you don't there'll be a bit of a gap between the last loop and the edge, and this can make it a little untidy when joining the seams together. So there are 55 rows, and you will find that there will be around 55 loops on the hook. It doesn't matter if there are a few more or a few less loops than 55. At this stage it is the length of the brim that is important. So the next thing to do is to chain 1 and mark the end stitch with a stitch marker, and do a normal Tunisian crochet return pass, i.e. pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, all the way to the end of the row. It is worth just pulling the end loop a little tighter. And now for a knit stitch. So insert the hook into the second stitch between the front and the back vertical bars, yarn over and pull up a loop. That is the first knit stitch. Now do another knit stitch into the third stitch, now another knit stitch into the fourth stitch, etc., and just work your way along to the end of the row. The last knit stitch is into the marked space at the end of the row. Now chain 1 and do a normal Tunisian crochet return pass, remembering to place a stitch marker in the last stitch of the row. I'm just finishing the return pass here. Now for the forward pass. Now do a knit stitch into the second stitch and another knit stitch into the third stitch, and continue with knit stitches all the way along to the end of the row. And continue repeating the forward passes and return passes until the fabric is 7 inches deep. For a more slouchy beanie, just add a few more rows. Incidentally, I keep both balls of yarn attached without cutting fairly late on to make sure that I'm happy with the way the beanie is going. If not, then I can easily unravel the project. But everything looks okay here, so I'm now going to cut the brim yarn. Now do a normal return pass, and the next forward pass will be the first forward pass of the reduction to create a nice domed top to the hat. I'm gradually going to reduce the width of the fabric by doing 2 stitches together after every 5th stitch. The loop on the hook counts as stitch number 1, so now do 4 knit stitches, then without yarning over, push the hook between the front and back vertical bars of the next 2 stitches, yarn over and pull through, bringing up a loop. That is the first reduction. Now do 5 knit stitches, and now do 2 knit stitches together, and keep going with 2 knit stitches together after every 5th stitch until the end of the row. I'm just reaching the end of the forward pass, and now do a normal Tunisian crochet return pass. I'm just completing the return pass, and now do a normal forward pass of knit stitch without any reductions. I'm now completing the forward pass without reductions, and there should be 48 loops on the hook. Now for a normal return pass. Just completing the return pass. Now this next forward pass is the second reduction, and for this reduction I'm going to do 2 knit stitches together after every 4th stitch. There are 4 loops on the hook, so the next stitch is a reduction. That's 2 knit stitches together. So for this row, continue with 4 knit stitches followed by 2 knit stitches together until the end of the row. Now for a normal return pass. Just completing the return pass here, and the next forward pass will be one knit stitch into each stitch with no reductions. Just completing the forward pass. So now for a normal return pass. I'm completing the return pass, and for the next forward pass, this is the third reduction, so I'm going to do 3 knit stitches followed by 2 knit stitches together all the way along the row. Now for a normal return pass. The next forward pass is a normal forward pass with no reductions. And now a normal return pass. The next forward pass is the fourth reduction, and this is 2 knit stitches followed by 2 knit stitches together all the way along the row. And now a normal return pass. This forward pass is the fifth reduction, and this is 2 stitches together after every stitch, 1 knit stitch, then 2 knit stitches together all the way along the row. And then do a normal return pass. Just completing the return pass, and the next forward pass is going to be the final reduction, and that is done by doing 2 stitches together all the way along the row. The final stitch is into the marked space. At this stage there will be around 9 loops on the hook. Again, it doesn't really matter how many there are so long as there aren't too many or too few. This is the final return pass. You can probably see that the reductions are now creating a nice domed shape to the fabric. So the final forward pass is all going to be slip stitch, and for that I'm going to revert to an ordinary crochet hook. In this case my lovely 6.5mm Knit Pro Symphony hook. So push the hook through the next vertical bar, yarn over and pull the yarn through both loops. I'm just going to mark this stitch so I know where the top of the hat begins and ends. And this is surprisingly useful when joining the edges together. Continue slip stitching along the top of the beanie. The final slip stitch is into the marked space at the end of the row. And at this stage, secure the loop with a stitch marker before cutting the yarn, because when the brim and the edges of the beanie have been slip stitched or sewn together, then you can try the beanie on and if necessary alter it, and that is much easier if the yarn is still intact. So I think the reduction has produced a very nice shape. So the next thing to do is to slip stitch the edges of the brim together, and to do that the best thing to do is to turn the beanie inside out. Insert the crochet hook into the corner of the brim by the long tail of yarn, push the hook through to the corresponding corner on the other side, and yarn over and pull the yarn through all the loops so there is one loop on the hook. And simply work up the brim by slip stitching the front loops together, making sure that the stitches directly opposite each other are slip stitched. And this should result in a virtually invisible seam. I've now reached the top of the brim, so I'm just going to slip stitch together the top loops that are opposite each other. Now pull the tail of yarn through and pull tight. This is the virtually invisible seam. Now slip stitch the edges of the main body of the beanie together, starting with the front bottom loop on either side, making sure to slip stitch the ones directly opposite each other. The markers at the beginning and end of the top row are quite useful because now I'm doing the seam of the main body of the beanie. I can clearly see that the top of the seam has been reached where the markers are. So do one last slip stitch, pull through all the loops and then pull the yarn right through. Now the edges of the beanie have been slip stitched together, the beanie can be tried on for size. If happy with the result, the yarn can then be pulled through and cut, and the loose ends from the seams can be sewn in. Now it is time to close the hole at the top of the beanie. It's only very small, so the best way to do this is to use a darning needle and create a drawstring to pull the circle closed. Again, it is worth turning the beanie inside out for a better result. Now there is only a tiny hole left, just close it with a single stitch across and pull tight. There may be a tail of yarn on the other side, so with a darning needle push it through the top of the beanie to the inside. Now tie the two ends of yarn together securely. I always use a reef knot. And leave them intact on the inside of the beanie for the time being in case a pom-pom is required. And this is what the seam looks like. Of course, if preferred, the edges of the beanie could always be sewn together, not necessarily slip stitched. But I like slip stitching because the beanie can always be undone if necessary. And that is exactly what I had to do with this pink beanie because it was too short originally. And here we are, a brace of 3-hour, 2-tone, one size beanies. They are really easy and enjoyable to make, very comfortable and very warm.